This is the Phebe Swill platform, and on my platform today we're learning about epilepsy. It's something that usually in the country we refer to as fix, and we hear about different views and thoughts and opinions about what epilepsy is actually about. They say it's a form of witchcraft. It has a lot of things, and so today we want to learn about epilepsy. We're going to hear from a doctor, and shortly enough you'll get to meet who we're talking to about epilepsy today. Stay with me on the show.
Across the world, over 50 million people suffer from a medical condition that is too often misunderstood. Some people believe that it is contagious, or that those who have it are mad and should be hidden away, or even that they are possessed by evil spirits. But epilepsy is none of these things. So what is epilepsy? Epilepsy is a chronic disorder of the brain characterized by recurrent seizures. These are brief disturbances in the electrical functions of the brain. Certain types of epilepsy are caused by head injuries, complications at birth, or infections from parasites, none of which is contagious. In many cases, we don't know what causes epilepsy. People with epilepsy can sustain injuries during seizures. They often struggle with anxiety and depression. Because of the stigma they face, it can be difficult for them to live a full and normal life. The burden of epilepsy is higher in low and middle-income countries, where 80% of people with epilepsy live. But what if we told you there is a solution? That 70% of people with epilepsy can be seizure-free with adequate treatment. And that this treatment costs as little as $5 per year. That's right, $5 per year. But here's the bad news. 7 out of 10 people with epilepsy worldwide do not receive treatment. This is what we call the epilepsy treatment gap. Why is this when such a low-cost solution exists? In most resource-poor settings, anti-epileptic medicines are often not available. Even if they are, very few healthcare providers have the training to recognize, diagnose and treat epilepsy.
So yes, in discussing that on my platform today, I have Professor Dr. Lisk, who is the consultant neurologist at the Hospital, and he's also the coordinator for the epilepsy program in Sierra Leone. Dr. Lisk, it's a pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure being here.
So I tried to do some research about epilepsy. Yes, we know it to be called fix in Sierra Leone, but perhaps you would help us with a scientific explanation of what epilepsy itself is.
Okay, I think maybe we need to look at the general functioning of the human brain. I think each one of our brains work with small levels of electricity that enables various parts of the body to function. But that electricity that does that job is usually constant and well controlled. There are instances which may be due to certain damage to the brain, or it may be due to poor functioning of the brain without any physical damage, whereby the level of electricity for some reason would increase. In other words, there will be high voltage, and when that happens, it sort of blacks out the brain, and that causes an epileptic seizure. So the manifestations of the seizure can vary. There, as you mentioned, we call epilepsy fix in Sierra Leone. But I think when you talk about fix, most people really relating to one particular type of epilepsy.
Which will come to look at though the different types of epilepsy and which ones are most common in Sierra Leone. But there's the general thought in Sierra Leone, that perception from some people that once you're epileptic, once you have fix, then devil, you're possessed. Does this disease have any relation to spiritual life, any form of demonic thing related to it?
No, except from the biblical point of view. I mean, people always point out that there are sections in the Bible that refer to the demonic aspect of epilepsy. What we know from a scientific point of view, that epilepsy is not demonic. It's purely a medical condition. And as I said, it's due to abnormal in the functioning, the electrical functioning of the brain.
Let's look at the types of epilepsy we have generally in the world and the most common one or ones in Sierra Leone.
Okay, the one that is easily recognizable, which the one we call fix, is the one which is dramatic, where a patient would suddenly fall to the ground. They will froth in the mouth and they will start shaking their upper and their lower limbs. They will be stiff. They might wet themselves and they might bite their tongue or their lips. And this can go on for 3, 4, 5 minutes, after which the patient would gradually recover. But they will be drowsy, they will complain of headache, they will complain of body pains, and it might take them a couple of hours really to get back to where they were. So that type of epilepsy, we call it a generalized tonic-clonic epilepsy, because tonic means stiffness of the muscle, clonic means jerking of the muscle, and this is what people normally refer to as fix. So that is the most obvious, the most recognizable form of epilepsy. But as you mentioned, there are different types of epilepsy, some that people will not even recognize as epilepsy. That brings to mind the type of epilepsy that occur mainly in children, which is called absence seizure.
How does that go?
So with absence seizure, a child will be doing something and then suddenly they'll stop for like 5 or 10 seconds. They won't fall, they won't twitch, but then after that they just continue what they're doing. It's like playing the child on a video strip and pressing pause for 5 seconds and then press play.
So it doesn't go beyond 5 seconds?
No, it can go 5, 10, 15 seconds, but it's not prolonged. We're talking in terms of usually
And this type of
seconds.
seizure, does it only happen in kids?
It usually starts in kids, and most of it would resolve before they're adult, but some can go on to young adulthood.
Because there are times you would be talking to someone and then it's like they're in completely a different world. You'd be like, hello, I'm still here. So
yes, well, sometimes it's difficult. That's the difficulty in actually diagnosing this type of epilepsy. Because, for instance, in children, when they're in the classroom, and they're having these attacks, their teacher usually feels that they're just absent-minded. They're not paying attention, and some of them really get beaten for that, and they get punished for that. But what you're mentioning could well be just somebody who is absent-minded, somebody is thinking of something else rather than somebody having a seizure. So that is another form of epilepsy called absent seizure. But then you also have a form of epilepsy which is called myoclonic epilepsy. That one is quite dramatic in the sense that the patient will be doing something and then all of a sudden their muscle will just twitch like that, as if they're having an electric shock. It only lasts for a second. And if they're holding something in their hand, like a spoon or pen, they're writing, they can throw that away, and in less than a second, 2 seconds, they're back to normal. So that again, people don't recognize as epilepsy, but it is a form of epilepsy, and we see that in Sierra Leone as well.
I've heard from some people, they say sometimes they get electrocuted by funny things like even clothes or things that you would wonder, why would this thing really want to electrocute someone? It's like small things, even towels and things.
Yeah, well, that's static electricity.
Is it part of epilepsy?
No, that's not part of electricity.
Okay.
But sometimes when you get shocked, by static, you might appear as if you have myoclonic epilepsy because you might twitch and jump like that. But that's the differential. That's what you have to make sure that what you're having is not due to some stimulus from outside, but coming from inside the body, as epilepsy normally does.
When people with epilepsy usually get these attacks, sometimes you see them in the streets. It seems quite dangerous. It looks to be very dangerous. How dangerous is it now, especially in terms of life and death? Does epilepsy kill?
Yes. Epilepsy, if you have epilepsy in occasions or in conditions that may be harmful to your health, for instance, if somebody is swimming and they have a fit, they'll drown because during the time that they're having their fit, they're unconscious, they cannot take care of themselves and they can drown. Similarly, if you're climbing a ladder or you're getting water from a well or you're cooking, open fire, these are all instances where if you have a seizure, it could be quite, injurious to your health, and in some cases it can actually be fatal. So yes, from that point of view, epilepsy can have fatal consequences. There is also a condition in people with epilepsy that's called SUDEP, that's sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, whereby patient with epilepsy might just die suddenly for no obvious reason. Before, people usually think that maybe they have a seizure and they choke, because it usually happens at night when they're asleep. And people believe that maybe they had a seizure and they choke and they die. But close studies have shown that this is not what happens. They feel that it's either a sudden heart attack that they have that may be related to their epilepsy, or some other incident that caused sudden death. It's quite rare, by the way. So if somebody with epilepsy is listening, it's not something that's likely to happen. And it tends to happen to patients with epilepsy who are not well controlled, those that don't take their medication and they have frequent fits. So yes, there are certain instances where epilepsy can be fatal.
Now we're going to look at, you've talked about medicines, and we'll look at the cure and treatment, but let's look at how epilepsy can be diagnosed. What are the signs and symptoms?
Okay, well, the signs are clear, as I've mentioned. If people's symptoms fall into the categories that I've mentioned, either a generalized tonic-clonic fit or a myoclonic fit or an absent seizure, then the diagnosis is there. In fact, epilepsy is one of the conditions where your diagnosis is made from the history, usually history of people who are witnesses, not from the patient, himself or herself, because they tend not to know what's going on during the time they're having a seizure. So that's why it's very important when somebody presents for the first time that they come with somebody who has witnessed their seizure. Well, there and then from the description that they give, you can make the diagnosis even without any investigations whatsoever.
Well, in the case of the kids now, the absent seizure, that sounds like a bit of a challenge, because for the kids, they might not be aware of what's happening to them. And the parents, as you've said, in schools, they would be punished. What should parents do to be able to detect that in their kids?
Well, parents as well as teachers, those who spend a lot of time with a kid, would probably have observed, because when they have these attacks, although it only lasts 5-10 seconds, they have several a day. So they would have observed that there are instances when this child is not paying attention, there are instances when this child looks distant. So if they come with that history, then yes, it gives you an indication that you may be dealing with absent seizure. But in addition to the history, which, as I mentioned, is the mainstay of diagnosis, there are also investigations that you can do that can assist. This investigation, I would emphasize, that they don't make the diagnosis for you, because that should have already been made from your history. But they help you to confirm the diagnosis, and they help you also sometimes to classify the type of seizures that they have. And the main investigation I'm referring to is the EEG, what is called EEG. That stands for electroencephalography. Essentially, an EEG is measuring or recording the brainwave in your head. So basically, you put several electrodes on the head. These are wires that you can paste with special electrode glue on the head over a wide area of the head, and you connect it to the machine and it goes to a computer. And the patient just sits there. We don't put anything into the patient, we don't put any electricity from the patient, we just record from the patient. And you can actually see from the screen how the electrical activity of the brain is working. And if during the recording they tend to have a period where there is very high voltage, then you can detect it straight away, and that confirms your diagnosis. And there are certain types of epilepsy that give you a particular pattern, a specific pattern that tells you, for instance, in patients with absence seizures, the pattern you see on the EEG is very specific to that type of epilepsy.
But all the patterns can be easily picked up by the machine.
Well, yes, it's on the machine, but of course it's whoever is doing the recording that has to be trained to be able to recognize the various patterns that you can get from these patients when you do the EEG.
Wow, this is quite interesting. Please give us an estimate of roughly how many people do we have living with this condition in Sierra Leone that have come to your clinic that you know of?
Okay, we estimate the number of people with epilepsy in Sierra Leone at about 100,000. This is based on the WHO figure of prevalence in Africa of about 1.4%. So if you have 7 million people, okay, 1.4% of that is close to 100,000. Mm-hmm. So that's when we're talking about epilepsy, we're talking about more epilepsy than people who have HIV, people who have AIDS. Yet still, it does not seem to command the same importance or the same recognition as HIV. And when you're talking about stigma also, the stigma from epilepsy is probably greater than the stigma from HIV.
Because with HIV you can hide it.
Absolutely. And epilepsy you cannot hide it. So it is quite common. And there are two main services in the country. We have our services which is based at Corners, but we have clinics in all the districts. And then there is a service in McKinney run by the Catholic order there, and they tend to take care of Bombali and the Moyamba district, while we do the rest of the country. We have in our books maybe 5,000 patients already, and they have maybe the same. So if we're talking about 100,000 and we only have 10,000 that have been reached or targeted, then you can see that there's still a whole lot of people out there who have not even accessed the medical facilities that are available.
Doc would still want to know about how does epilepsy transfer from one person to the other, and the treatment, the cure, and more things, but we'll get to talk about that shortly. Stay with us. It's time to take a message from our sponsors. Our main sponsors are Rokel Commercial Bank and SPT.
What's you dey agba for go this morning? I dey go na bank. Oh, you know say man get for go pull small face. I dey go shop for dom to we. I no look late safe. You no need for yagba yourself. All you need a smartphone where you dey download the app easy. What you dey talk? With your SIM couple, you can do cash withdrawal, cash deposit, pay for goods, you dey check your balance, transfer from one Rokel bank account to another Rokel bank account, or you can transfer from one Rokel bank account to another bank account wey not a Rokel bank account. You can pay bills like NPA, EDSA, DSTV, and plenty other bill. You can even buy airtime for your GSM phone. In Otapleo, requested for foreign exchange transaction. You can do it with your Rokel SIM couple. You can make payments through e-check account. That means you can pay person will not even get account. And cash e-check from any Rokel commercial bank ATM machine. You mean say I just need for open my phone? I do all my transaction on my phone? Just go to the agent when at the FIA business person, and you can do plenty other thing them, like for check your balance for yourself. Well, an officer I need for go to bank direct. I go into cookery first. From there, I don't me transaction on before with rocket sim couple. You phone and you bank. Remember say this product na salon no more in the work.
Alright, thanks for staying with us through that break. Thanks to Rokel Commercial Bank and SPT, our main sponsors. Well, that's Sierra Pharmatech, our main sponsors for the Phebe Swill platform. I still have Dr. Radcliffe D. Lisk with me talking about epilepsy today, what you usually refer to as fix. So we're learning about the condition. If you're experiencing it, you know what to do. If you see someone experiencing it, you would also know what to do. Doc, we want to know, epilepsy, does it transfer from one person to the other? If it does, how?
No, it's not a communicable disease.
Okay.
And that is one of the main problems we have in Sierra Leone, not just in Sierra Leone, in Africa and a lot of developing countries, where people feel that epilepsy is transferable. And for that reason, they tend to distance themselves from somebody who is having a seizure.
Even by birth, is it something like, you know, some things they say if it's in your family, if it's in the DNA, if it's in the gene. Okay. Does epilepsy work like that as well?
Yeah. You do have some types of epilepsy that are genetically transmitted, okay. But for us in Sierra Leone, the majority of epilepsy we see as a result of secondary damage. Most of them during delivery. You know, we have a very poor obstetric practice in Sierra Leone, poor obstetric records. So women tend to be in labor for too long and they don't get the best antenatal care. And even when it comes to delivery, they probably don't get the best service. So babies are born with injuries to their brain, either due to lack of oxygen because they didn't breathe properly after they were born, or maybe the method of delivery would result in some sort of brain damage. And these children, over a course of several years, may develop epilepsy. And other things like infection, like cerebral malaria in children, like meningitis, these can lead to epilepsy. Then you have head injuries, okay, going up the scale, the age scale, looking at adolescents, young people, accidents is a common cause, head injuries. So these are all what we might call secondary type of epilepsy, epilepsy that's due to obvious brain insult, injury to your brain. And then you have some type of epilepsy where you can do the most sophisticated investigation, you will not find any abnormality in the brain whatsoever, but yet these patients do have seizures. And this is due to the functioning of the brain rather than the abnormal structuring of the brain. So you do have some type of epilepsy that are genetically transmitted. They tend to diagnose that more in developed countries because they can do genetic screening for some of these patients and genetic diagnosis. Some of them, they have actually identified the gene that is responsible for seizures. But we don't have that sophistication here.
There's a common thought in Sierra Leone, though, when people are epileptic, those who, well, experience the attack in the open, people always say if you accidentally step on the spittle, you would also contract epilepsy. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely none whatsoever. This is these are the myths that we have been trying to debunk all these years. I mean, we've been doing all sorts of public education and awareness raising. It does not transfer by sputum from a patient. It does not transfer by touching the patient if they're having a seizure. And you could imagine a mother that has a child with epilepsy. How many times would she not have touched that child? How many times would she not have touched the sputum, etc.? But she doesn't develop epilepsy. But it's a firm belief in our culture that this happens. And as a result of that, people are having seizures in areas of danger.
And
nobody would attend them, nobody would remove them from the area of danger and leave them.
But when that is happening, if there is someone around you suffering from an epileptic attack, what are you supposed to do?
Right. The main thing to do, the number one thing to do is to make sure the patient doesn't harm themselves. So in other words, what you do is you remove anything that's close to them that may cause danger. If they're near a fire or they're near a precipice or a stone or something, make sure that you bring them, you move them to a safe area, and then you lay them on their side so that they don't choke. Okay, you lay them on their side, and you just leave them until the heat wears off, which might take about 5 minutes, sometimes much less than that, and they will recover. Okay. There is nothing active. You don't have to put spoon in their mouth.
Yes, that's spoon I was going to talk about. There are times when they look for metal spoons and they just open their mouths and put it in.
It's a no-no. That is something you should not do. I mean, you damage their teeth, and of course, if you put something that they can swallow, then that's of course another complication. So you should not put anything whatsoever in their mouth if they're having a seizure.
Do you give them water to drink or anything?
No, you don't have to give them anything. I mean, when they come around, when they're fully conscious, you can do that. But during the time they're having a seizure and the time they're drowsy afterwards, it's not advisable to give them anything to drink.
Let's look at the age bracket. Does epilepsy only start from childhood or does it continue? Do you discover epilepsy in people at, well, old age? Yes. Is there an age bracket?
Yeah, the oldest patient we have is 90. You can have epilepsy.
And you diagnosed that when the patient was in the 90s?
Yes. Epilepsy can occur in any age. There's a bit of difference between what happens here in developed countries and what happens in developing countries. Here we find that most of the patients we see are either children or young adults. In developed countries, a lot of the patients they see will be adult and even older adult. But you have to look at this in the context of the population distribution, because in a country like Sierra Leone, most of the population are young adults and children anyway. So that you would expect that whatever you're looking at, you'll probably find it more in young adults and children. But some people find it hard to believe that you can get epilepsy when you're older. Yes, you can. The thing is, when you do develop epilepsy at an older age, then the chances that this is due to something occurring in the brain, a physical change in the brain, is much higher. Something like a tumor, something like a stroke, you know, that may be causing the abnormal electrical activity is much higher the older you get. So that's why when somebody who is much older presents with epilepsy, then you want to do further investigations like brain scans and other things to see if you can detect something that may have changed in their brains for them to start developing epilepsy at that age.
Wow. And also there are people who, the other lady in the documentary who spoke about at some point she was taken to a native doctor to be treated. These are things that happen with some of these patients. Instead of going straight to the hospital, they're taken to native doctors or some other places just in search of help.
Yes, in fact, we've got a database and we've been looking at a lot of these issues. And we found that 55% of patients that come to our clinics have already seen traditional healers. And traditional healers, they have various methods that they use to treat inverted comma epilepsy, some of which are obviously harmful to the patients. And let's forget about scarifications where they mark the patient, their arms, their back, etc. Because you know that has complications of infection, tetanus, etc. But they also give them things to drink from herbs and even kerosene. There's a patient we had who was given kerosene by a traditional healer to drink. But because people believe that epilepsy is demonic and it's not a medical condition, you find out that a lot of them, even intelligent, inverted comma, educated people, would seek a traditional healer rather than go to a hospital when they're faced with somebody with epilepsy. So it's very widespread, very common.
That in itself is a serious challenge when you get to see people not getting the right form of treatment. Epilepsy, is it curable?
We tend not to use the word curable, we will use manageable. Epilepsy can be managed. In medicine, you have conditions that can be cured, you have conditions that can be controlled or managed. Let's take, for instance, malaria. Okay, if you have a malaria attack, You take your medication for 3 days, you are cured of that particular malaria attack. Okay. But let's take somebody who has hypertension. You don't cure them. They take medication constantly for them to lower their blood pressure, and they're managed, they're controlled whilst they're on their medication. Take somebody with diabetes, it's the same. They have to take medication all the time to make sure that their blood sugar is controlled. Somebody with HIV, that's what happens. Once they're diagnosed, they have to be on medication that would suppress their infection and keep them well as long as they are on their medication. So these are conditions that can be controlled, that can be managed, but they are not cured. And epilepsy is one of these conditions. You don't cure epilepsy, because by curing you mean that you can treat the patient and they can stop all their medication and they are no longer having seizures. There are certain seizures that would stop around puberty and the patient might not need medication. Again, certain types of seizures, not very common. But on the whole, when somebody has been diagnosed with seizures, most of them would probably need to be on medication lifelong. There are times when they have gone for a few years without having a seizure. You can attempt to gradually take them off their medication. And you can do so, and more than half of them might continue for several years without any medication, without having a seizure. But there's always a risk that the seizure might recur. So they need to know that, yes, we can get you off your medication, but we are not guaranteeing that you're cured, because maybe in 5 years or in 10 years you might have another seizure.
Do you follow the trend of labs and scientists in the world who try to find a cure for epilepsy?
Well, I don't know what you mean. I mean, there are all sorts of research going on about epilepsy at the moment.
Because as recent as yesterday, when I was online trying to do research, I stumbled upon there's a lab that's trying to research on marijuana. I think there's an excerpt of marijuana that they're researching on that they think can cure epilepsy.
Well, yeah, the question of marijuana, it's not as new as it might appear. It's one aspect, you know, marijuana has different components, right? You have the component that gives you the hallucination, the high, and you also have the other component, the CBD, okay, fraction. And it's that CBD fraction that they have been using to treat certain types of epilepsy, mainly epilepsy in children, okay. They have certain very severe epilepsy in children, one called Dravet syndrome and a couple of others, Lennox-Gastaut. They have a few very, very severe epilepsy in children that do not respond to any form of medication whatsoever. And they found out that the CBD fraction of cannabis do help these patients quite significantly. Some of them actually stops their seizure. So there's a lot of research going on, but I think some people have actually gone overboard. They feel that marijuana now can cure all forms of epilepsy. No, that is not true. So far, the evidence that we have from research, mainly starting in the US, is that children with very severe types of epilepsy can be controlled, and in some cases the epilepsy can actually stop while they are taking this particular fraction of cannabis. So yes, more research continues, and I think in time we may be able to expand the use of cannabis into other forms of epilepsy, but that would need evidence, and so far the evidence is lacking.
Okay, Doc would continue to talk about that and how epilepsy patients are being treated in the country, what more can be done. Perhaps even this now that comes across as hope, something that people can look into, maybe even conduct a research. Well, if Sierra Leone is well capacitated enough to handle that, if we can execute that, perhaps have a lab or something. We'll talk about that shortly. We're taking another commercial break. Let's hear from our major sponsors again, Raquel Commercial Bank and Sierra Pharmatech.
What's you doing for go this morning? Are they gonna bank? Oh, you know, say man get for go pull small face. I dey go shop for dong to we. I no look late safe. You no need for yagba yourself. all you need a smartphone. When you download the app, easy. What you dey talk? With your SIM couple, you can do cash withdrawal, cash deposit, pay for goods, you dey check your balance, transfer from one local bank account to another local bank account, or you can transfer from one local bank account to another bank account wey not a local bank account. You can pay bills like NPA, EDSA, DSTV, and plenty other bill. You can even buy airtime for your GSM phone. In Nota Play, requested for foreign exchange transaction, you can do it with your local SIM couple. You can make payment through e-check account. That means say you can pay person will not even get account. And cash e-check from any local commercial bank ATM machine. You mean say I just need for open my phone? I do all my transaction on my phone? Just go to the agent when at the FIA business person and you can do plenty other thing them like for check your balance for yourself. Well, an officer I need for go to bank direct. I go eat cookie first. From there, I do my transaction on my phone with local SIM couple. You phone and you bank. Remember say this product na salon no more in the work.
Thank you very much for staying with us through that break. I still have Dr. Lisk with me. Doctor, epilepsy patients in the country, right? We mentioned if you're going by the WHO statistic, we should have more epilepsy patients than even HIV and AIDS. But then there's little or no serious attention being given to the condition. How do you think as a country we can be able to, well, pay much more attention and help epileptic patients?
Well, the ministry has to come in. We have been lobbying the ministry, particularly the primary health care unit, that they should get epilepsy as one of the diseases that they monitor and that they follow up when they do their statistical analysis of things that they see. And we've been trying to get them to get epilepsy on that list for over, it must be 5-6 years, and it's still not there. Because until you start collecting figures, knowing how many people with epilepsy are around in your PHUs, in your district hospitals, etc., you will not be able to appreciate the magnitude of the problem. We continue to lobby. They did at one point appoint somebody as a focal person for epilepsy in the ministry, but that person has moved on. I think he's retired now and he has not been replaced. So really it's a question of the ministry giving the priority that is required to epilepsy for them to actually put the resources that is required. For now, most of what is used in epilepsy management come from NGOs, come from well-wishers, etc. Even the drugs that we give patients are not from the ministry. So the ministry needs to do something.
Who pays for the drugs that the patients get right now?
Well, what we do, we have, at the moment, we have a charity that we work with that supply our drugs. We actually buy the drugs and then we make the drug available to patients on a cost recovery basis. They pay 10,000 leones for the whole month, even if they're on 2 different medications, that's all they pay. And we turn that money over and order the medication. In fact, when the ministry actually stock some of the drugs that we use, their cost recovery price is higher than what we offer at the clinic. So we try to make this as cheap as possible because mostly patients who have epilepsy are unemployed and they do have financial difficulties. And even in children under 5, we do not charge them. We give them the medication free. And those that we really feel that that cannot afford the medication, the indigents, we give them free. So we go quite a long way to try to provide medication. We also have a partner in the United States that send certain medication for us that we make available to the patients free of charge, those that are on those medications. So that's how we've been maintaining the service for like 10 years now. But it can't go on like that. At some point, the ministry should take responsibility for providing enough medication for these patients and to make sure that it's always available. Because unlike other conditions, somebody with epilepsy who is on management with a medication cannot stop that medication. It has to be continuous every day, year after year, month after month. We know what happens when ministry procure medication. That they procure in a batch of medication and then they run out and then there's a gap before maybe it comes back again. So it has to be properly planned that continuous supply of medication is available. We can give as much help as we can, but I think eventually the ministry has to take up the responsibility to manage patients with epilepsy.
For people who, well-wishers who might think, well, this is a serious thing and it might come close to my home, how can they help?
Well, we've had some help from one or two commercial houses. NP is one that have, given funds in the past. Sarah Ruta has given funds in the past. And these funds can be used to procure medication. They can also be used for training. Because we do training all the time. We've trained over the past 6-7 years, we trained over 2,000 health workers. And these are not doctors we're talking about. We're talking about CHOs, we are talking about nurses, enrolled nurses, we are talking about, the healthcare workers that man your peripheral health units, where the village person will come with somebody with epilepsy. We want them to know about epilepsy so that they can even offer basic treatment. So we do this training from time to time. Just in December, we trained 100 CHOs from Kenema, Pujiamu, Bond, and Bo districts. And next month, we're planning to do a training in Makeni for Bombali, for Konadugu district. So we do this training, and we've been doing this for the past maybe 8-9 years on a regular basis to update health workers on A, how to diagnose epilepsy, and B, how to manage, and C, when to refer. So these training cost money because we have to pay them for their transportation from their location in their units, which may be quite far from the district headquarters. Like the last one was a 2-day workshop we had. We have to pay them for overnight stay. So it is an expensive. At the moment, we do have some support, so overseas support to help with this training, but it's not always there, and sometimes we have to foot the bills ourselves. So if somebody wants to support the program, they can decide whether what they're providing, if it's money they're providing is for medication or it's for training. But whatever it is, you can be assured that it will be.
Let's look at the permanent solution to epilepsy itself. In other countries, in African countries, even Ghana, they have labs where they research on different health issues and looking at cures and all. Is it far-fetched for Sierra Leone at this point?
I don't think for epilepsy, it's not a question of labs. I mean, epilepsy, I think all that you need to know to effect a proper program is already out there. You don't need research to treat what we have right now. What we have, our main...
But we would still need research for a cure.
The kind of research that's going on for cure for epilepsy now, this is really high-powered research. I mean, we're talking about people who are talking about electrical stimulation, detecting seizures before they occur and then giving an electrical stimulation to abort the seizure. That's the way epilepsy is going right now, like putting like a pacemaker that can be wired to the brain that can anticipate when a seizure is coming and then sort of kill it before it happens. So we're not talking about a lab that you can set up in Sierra Leone or Ghana to look at epilepsy now. I think epilepsy now has gone beyond that. Now they're not even looking so much at drugs now, they're actually looking at the actual electrical physiology of epilepsy. But what we need here, first of all, is pretty basic. I think the initial thing we need is for people to accept that this is a medical condition and come to clinics. I mean, you can have clinics all over the country if you want, but if people don't believe that this is a medical condition, then they are not going to go there. So our problem is very basic, and we need the public awareness, we need the sensitization to let people know that services are available, albeit basic, but that they're there to be used. And
so those who would want to be tested, how do they go about it? Where should they go?
Well, as I said, we do have clinics in all the districts. So unfortunately, we cannot go, we have not been able to go down to village level for now for the kind of resource that is required for that. We do not have that. That's why we train people from there. So essentially,
in Freetown, where do they?
In Freetown, we have a big clinic at Connaught Hospital, and we also have a clinic at Lumley.
So those who would want to come to Connaught and Lumley, when they, of course, Connaught is such a big place. When they get to Connaught, what
every Thursday morning we have a clinic, an epilepsy clinic. Every Thursday morning at Connaught. The clinic at Lumley, which is pretty well open most of the time. There's a nurse that's stationed there, and she deals with patients as and when they come in. There's a clinic at Rukupa that runs once a month. I think the second Saturday every month. We have a clinic at Waterloo. We have a clinic at that's just in the western area, and then of course in the provinces we have a clinic in all the districts. So the clinics are there. It's for people to use them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lisk. I know there's a lot more we can talk about, but for now I feel we've covered most of the basics to help guide our people in epilepsy. Thank you very much. You've been such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tutor. Well, yes, because you've been teaching us. We've learned a lot about epilepsy here today. So, epilepsy, you've heard from the doctor, it's not a form of witchcraft. So when you see someone suffering from fix, it's not a form of witchcraft. What you need to do is you help the person to stay off danger, turn the person to lay by the side, and don't attempt to put spoon or anything in the person's mouth as we do usually. Don't. You don't need to feed them at that moment. When they recover, if they want to eat or drink, yes, you can feed them something. And the habit of stealing from them, please stop it. And always know that it's a situation that is far from home, but it might also be close to home. You never know who in your family or someone, a loved one or friend might be a patient of epilepsy. So in any way you can help, please do. It's not always about giving donations to social events or entertainment events and all that. There are people whose lives need to be touched. So no matter how little, no matter how much you can help, contribute towards saving lives and helping people living with epilepsy. Go to the Connaught Hospital and ask for the epilepsy section, and they will direct you, and you can just go there and make a donation or contribution and give your support in any way, little or major. Well, we hope you've learned from the discussion on learning about epilepsy today on the Phebe Swill platform. Thank you very much for watching the show. Thank you for listening, and thanks to our sponsors, Rukel Commercial Bank and SPT, for sponsoring. Thank you very much. Thanks to Dr. Lisk for teaching us all we've learned today.
Thank you too.
Well, that's the end of today's episode. I am Phebe Swill. Thank you very much for watching the Phebe Swill platform. Cheers.